I'm Kaluna, and welcome to another Patreon-sponsored episode of Screenshots. So I was asked a little while back to do an episode on Gravity Falls. It is definitely one of my favorite shows in recent memory, and it's really not that much of a stretch to say that it's probably going to join my list of all-time favorite cartoons, along with shows like Hey Arnold, Digimon, or Avatar: The Last Airbender. I was waiting for the show to conclude before making this episode since Alex Hirsch, the show's creator, had said the show would be ending after only 2 seasons. Now, as much as I would have loved more episodes, I can completely understand his decision to end on a good note. The whole show is supposed to take place during one summer, and it really feels like a complete story. If he had continued the show past when he believed it to be done, well, maybe we would have had more episodes, but who knows if it would have been as good. I get it. I wish there was more Gravity Falls too, but I understand and respect Alex Hirsch's decision, and it won't prevent me from enjoying the wonderful 40 episodes him and his creative team brought us. Now with that out of the way, let's get down to business. Wait, no, never mind. I had a hard time trying to decide how I was going to tackle this review. It definitely took me a while to organize my thoughts. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to list my top 10 favorite episodes, but this top 10 list is going to be a little different from a normal one. Couple differences. Number 1. Although these are my top 10 favorite episodes, I'm not actually going to be listing them in a numerical order. However, at the end of the video, I will say which one is my favorite episode, so make sure you stay tuned for that. However, the way I will be ordering them is... Number 2, I will be listing these in chronological order, starting with the earliest episodes and ending with the latest episodes. I feel like this is a good way to show my experience of watching the show as it was happening, and really I didn't want to break them down into normal 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 format, so I thought this was the best way to approach that. 3. For each episode that I list, I'll be pointing out particular things that I like about it that the show overall does pretty well. And number 4, this is my top 10 list, so of course this is going to be my opinion, so try to refrain from leaving hateful comments below saying that I didn't list this one episode that you really loved more than others. So, with that, let's begin.
From now on, I want to spend them all. Every summer down at Gravity Falls, y'all. I want it all, the mystery's call. Every summer down at Gravity Falls, y'all. From now on, I'll never go back. Every summer at the Mystery Shack, yo. Matter of fact, I want every summer back, cause I wasted every one that wasn't at.
Season 1, Episode 5, The Inconveniencing. So, quick bit of history. I actually didn't start watching Gravity Falls until the first season was completely finished. I had heard about it and I kept seeing images of the rainbow vomiting gnome all over the internet, and I had heard about it, but I just hadn't gotten around to watching it. That is, until one day I was checking the channel guide and it happened to say that Gravity Falls was on. I'm like, alright, sure, why not? I've heard about this. So I go to watch the episode, and it was the season finale, Gideon Rises. Needless to say, I was a little confused. However, there must have been some kind of marathon on or something, because immediately after that, the pilot episode came on. And then I was a little more confused, but eventually I figured out what was going on, and I thought, alright, sure, yeah, I can see why the internet has really latched onto this. But it wasn't until a few days later that I watched The Inconveniencing that I really found out that this was an amazing show. It's really hard for me to say what it is about this episode in particular that really pointed that out for me, but there's just something about this episode that really, really works. It's also the episode that I've probably seen the most. I've probably watched that one episode about 10 times or so. The episode highlights one of the staples of the show, clever writing that not only has really weird and bizarre slapstick moments,
Onward, Sail
but really smart and clever writing that doesn't talk down to its audience.
Stay tuned for the Friday night movie, The Duchess Approved, starring Sturley Stemple-Burgess as the Duchess, and Crampton St. Rumterfrabble as the irascible coxswain Saunterblug and Hampshire.
Wendy's friends could have very easily been written to be annoying, obnoxious, or just plain stupid. However, they actually talk like real teenagers, and even though we don't get a ton of background history for this group of friends, you can tell that they really are close with one another and that they have some kind of believable friendship. And, if nothing else, the idea of a haunted convenience store is perfect for this group, combining both humor and some rather creepy imagery, especially for a Disney show. Definitely was having some gargoyle-like feels, though not as serious, obviously. It's also a great episode of one of the show's most interesting strengths. No matter what outrageous situation an episode centers around, the resolution to the problem almost always centers around a personal lesson learned by the characters. In this case, the ghostly torture of Dipper, Wendy, and all of her friends is put to an abrupt end by Dipper being true to himself and not trying to act older than he is. When in doubt, get a silly costume and do the lammy dance. Season 1, Episode 10, Fight Fighters. Featuring the amazing sprite animation of Paul Robertson, who also did the sprite art for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the Game, this is another episode that I've seen quite a number of times, and each time I find something I hadn't really noticed before. This episode contains numerous allusions to video games, whether it's the random games in the background of the arcade or really specific jokes like the Oh My Car. You can tell there was a lot of love and appreciation for video games here.
Uh-oh, I think I hear my uncle. Stay perfectly still. I said stay still.
This is as still as I can stay.
Alex Hirsch has said on numerous occasions that the inspiration for Gravity Falls comes from his childhood summers spent with his twin sister, so when the show makes references to video games like this, you can really sense the nostalgia. Although I've played video games since I was a kid and did actually recognize a good number of the allusions, that's not what I like about this episode. What I like is how the episode not only manages to show love and respect for a lot of classic games, but it doesn't alienate anyone who may not necessarily have played them.
Super Power Ninja Turbo Dio Ultra Hyper Mega Multi Alpha Beta Extra Uber Prefix Combo!
That's what I love about the show. Even if you aren't familiar with the particular episode's subject, you just get caught up in the enthusiasm and it makes the episode all the more enjoyable. One thing that helps the references not feel too exclusionary is that the episode's overall themes are mostly universal. Dipper gets himself into a situation that he isn't able to deal with on his own, and the way he tries to fix it makes things worse before they get better. No matter what the specifics are or how many fake Street Fighter characters are around, anybody can really relate to that feeling, which just makes the episode work, even if the references don't have a ton of context. Season 1, Episode 12, Summerween. Halloween is my favorite holiday, so it really shouldn't be that much of a surprise that Summerween is one of my favorite Gravity Falls episodes. As silly as it is that the town of Gravity Falls celebrates Halloween again in the summer, it fits with the format of the show and they tweak it to make Summerween just different enough from Halloween that it feels like its own thing. The Summerween Trickster is a really fun and well-designed monster, looking appropriately creepy but having a backstory that makes it surprisingly easy to feel bad for it.
You have insulted me, and for this you must pay with your lives.
Oh, what a cute little mask. You're a funny guy, aren't you?
The overall conflict, Dipper getting stuck between having fun trick-or-treating with his sister or going to a party with Wendy and the older kids, was something I really identified with. There's numerous occasions where you both want to grow up faster, but at the same time it's easy to lose sight of what you have now.
I felt like I was getting a little too old to go trick-or-treating.
That's exactly why we need to go trick-or-treating, Dipper. We're getting older. There's not that many Halloweens left.
It's a simple message, and it's one of the more straightforward episodes of Gravity Falls, but the execution on this is spot on. Season 1, Episode 15, The Deep End. If there was any summer-themed episode trope, it would probably be a beach or pool episode. This episode manages to successfully weave together 3 plots all taking place at the town pool. Stan trying to find the perfect spot and battling Gideon and Tom and Jerry-esque moments, Dipper becoming assistant lifeguard and hanging out with Wendy, and mainly focusing on Mabel meeting and falling in love with a merman who has found himself trapped at the pool. All of their stories are balanced and nobody feels left out. Even Zeus has a few really funny lines that made me burst out laughing.
My people have been enslaved, Zeus. You must free us.
The inflatable pool duck revolution is at hand.
I also like that Gideon is there, but not acting as the main antagonist. It's cool to see that he does exist in this universe when he isn't enacting some grand plan to take over the Mystery Shack. This episode also has one of the funniest credit gags in the entire series. The Deep End highlights another strength of the show, the one-off character, like Mermando, Rumble McSkirmish, or Quentin Tremblay. Even if the character is only present for one episode, they are given enough development to feel like full-fledged characters, regardless of whether they make an appearance in another episode or not. They're unique, funny, and memorable, and sometimes that's all you need. Season 2, Episode 2, Into the Bunker. Another thing I really love about Gravity Falls is it is not afraid to be scary. The episode begins and ends with parodies of old horror movies as Wendy and Dipper watch movies together, only for them, Zeus, and Mabel to end up finding themselves in a horror situation themselves. The shapeshifter takes on some pretty creepy forms that I was actually surprised they got past the Disney censors, and even though he isn't there for long, you really get a sense of what he has lived through.
How do you like my true form? Go on, admit it, you like it.
And And you can't go wrong with a Mark Hamill cameo. The characters are funny and react in a way that you would expect, but when something suddenly gets dangerous, you feel that tension and it makes the episode all the more compelling. The show is not afraid to take risks, as seen with the relationship between Wendy and Dipper. Normally, if a younger character has a crush on an older one, it's played for laughs or isn't really discussed as a serious thing. We see how much it is affecting Dipper, and he doesn't get the girl in the end. The discussion they have at the end of the episode is extremely realistic.
I always kinda knew.
Wait, you did?
Yeah, man. I mean, you think I can't hear that stuff you're constantly whispering under your breath?
They are still friends, but now his feelings are out in the open and things might get awkward. It's a good lesson. Things don't always work out nicely, but you have to move on. Both this and the scares in the episode show that Gravity Falls isn't always going to sugarcoat things. Unless it's Smile Dip, of course. Season 2, Episode 4, Sock Opera. This episode has some of the funniest writing for me. A lot of it comes from the delivery. All of the actors in this show really know how to make the dialogue their own. Mabel's rock opera puppet show had a bunch of quick gags that just really work for me. Like the opening bit,
"Winches around, you're never bored. I am a mayor, and here's an award."
And the intermission.
I'm sorry, Mabel, but I have to go fight in the war.
Whether it's the absurdity of the scene, the voice work, or just my personal taste, I have found this episode to be the one that makes me laugh out loud the most. This is also where one of my favorite characters, Bill Cipher, really gets to shine. His introduction in Dreamscapers was good too, don't get me wrong, but now that his character has been established, you really see him in action more and he is just so entertaining. He can go from funny and charming one second to threatening and angry the next.
So what puppet are you gonna pick anyway?
Let's see. Eeny, meeny, miny.
It's so impressive to me that Alex Hirsch could take a concept as simple as the pyramid from the back of a dollar and make it such a really cool character. The timing with the writing and the animation is just so quick and energetic, and this episode is one of the best examples of that. Overall, Sock Opera is a fun, energetic episode and just really puts a smile on my face every time I watch it. Especially the Ave Maria sequence. Damn, that is so funny. Season 2, Episode 10, Northwest Mansion Noir. The town of Gravity Falls has a really colorful cast of characters, and it's cool to see that the team behind Gravity Falls was able to take these seemingly one-dimensional characters and really improve them over the course of the show. Pacifica Northwest starts out as the stereotypical bully/rival for Mabel, but in Northwest Mansion Noir, we finally get more development for her character.
We did it! Can I pay you to pretend that never happened?
I mean, before this episode, who was pairing Dipper with Pacifica? Well, probably someone, it is the internet. But the way this episode develops her newfound friendship with Dipper was really something I hadn't been expecting. Numerous characters over the course of the show start out very stereotypical or one-dimensional. Old Man McGucket, Robbie, and Pacifica are all good examples of how characters who are drastically different from their initial episode really can improve. You can tell that Alex Hirsch really paid attention to what fans were saying about the show and using that feedback to improve it. This episode also has some surprisingly dark subject matter in it that manages to be weaved in enough to be unsettling to the viewer but without it being flagged by the censors. Unlike that creepy imagery in the Into the Bunker episode, though there is plenty of that with axe-faced ghost guy! These are more things that left me thinking afterwards.
I'm sorry, they made me. I should have told you, but...
What kind of childhood must Pacifica have had to where she's been obediently trained like Pavlov's dog? Overall, this is just a fun and thrilling episode that manages to weave in some pretty interesting morals that could hit surprisingly close to home. Season 2, Episode 11, Not What He Seems. Out of all the episodes of Gravity Falls, including the finale, this is probably the one that kept me on the edge of my seat the most. This was finally the episode with more answers. What was Grunkle Stan building? Who was the author? And how is Stan involved with the author? This episode is all about trust, and it does its best to make the characters, and the audience through them, question everything that they've seen up until now.
Unless Stan...
Isn't...
Stan?
Some episodes of Gravity Falls can have some rather predictable outcomes, though this isn't always bad, but this one I had absolutely no idea where it was going. Gravity Falls has proven numerous times that it can be clever and funny, but this one shows that it can draw the viewer in and really immerse them in that world. It's good to see that episodes like this exist, because it shows how multifaceted the show can be. The artwork is also top-notch, particularly the visuals of the portal.
I trust you.
Mabel, are you crazy? We're all gonna...
What?
It's not much of a surprise that many iterations of that one scene were floating around Tumblr the following week. Dark, beautiful, and not being sure what will happen make this one of the best episodes of the whole series. Season 2, Episode 15, The Last Mabelcorn. On the other side of the spectrum, Gravity Falls can take ridiculous to extreme levels, as seen in The Last Mabelcorn. The portrayal of the unicorn in this is so friggin' hilarious. Sometimes you don't need to be subtle with the humor, and this episode takes that in stride. I don't know what it is about Celestabelle Bethabelle's voice that makes it so funny, but every time that unicorn talks, I burst out laughing.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a 3 o'clock posing in front of a rainbow.
The twist of the unicorns not being able to sense goodness in a person's heart also works extremely well.
All our dumb horns can do is glow, point towards the nearest rainbow, and play rave music.
Nice to hear that dance rave music making a return. There are some pretty clever gags and lines sprinkled about, like the drug bust and the end moral.
But today I learned that morality is relative.
But overall, this episode is one that I like to put on just to laugh and not really think too hard about it. It's also nice to see Wendy hanging around with the younger girls, and she gets one of my favorite lines in the entire episode.
We're crazed, angry, sweaty animals. We're not unicorns, we're women, and we take what we want!
That's a pretty mature message, especially for a kid's show. Though, to be fair, we do have the girls beating up a bunch of unicorns for their hair and blood, so I guess it evens out in the end? Season 2, Episodes 18 through 20, Weirdmageddon. Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to make a top 10 list without at least mentioning Weirdmageddon. Kinda cheating with this one, seeing as how this is technically 3 episodes with the length of 4, but whatever, it's my list, I make the rules. Weirdmageddon goes balls to the wall with this one. We get to see some pretty unique and creepy looking monsters, voiced by great comedians and guest stars. We see cameos from nearly every person in Gravity Falls, and Bill Cipher gets some of his most intimidating and funny lines, showing just how threatening he can be. These episodes highlight one of the most important things in the show, the relationship between Dipper and Mabel. It's how these two characters interact with one another that really is the heart of the show.
Mean it? You really coming home with me?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Awkward sibling hug?
The trust that Dipper and Mabel share is their ultimate weapon, and they get a glimpse of what can happen if it is lost by observing Stan and Ford's broken relationship. Viewers really identify with Dipper and Mabel because they feel like real people, and that is due to how personal the story is with Alex Hirsch. The first season helps to set up how the two of them work well together, while the second begins to separate them a bit, especially with Ford coming into the picture and threatening to divide them. I'd say that if I had to pick which part I enjoyed the most, it's probably the second part with the Mabel Land sequence. We get to see into Mabel's mind, and it is everything I could have imagined and more.
Welcome to Mabel Land. And this is worse than the apocalypse.
It manages to be both silly and strange, while also throwing in some rather poignant flashbacks of them growing up together. The kitty judge voiced by Jon Stewart also is very funny and lends itself well to the episode overall.
Objection?
I'll allow it. Us cats are famously curious. Meow meow.
These episodes all deal with something that I talked about at the very beginning of the review. Everything must come to an end. Alex Hirsch knew that fans would demand more episodes because we've come to love these characters and this world, but this is how he wanted the show to end, and he wanted to find a way to communicate his feelings to the audience in a compelling way. Mabel's desire to want summer to never end perfectly goes with audiences not wanting the show to end, and the show manages to not invalidate those opinions and still deliver a warm-hearted message. When I really stopped to think about why Alex Hirsch was ending Gravity Falls, it made me think of the ending to the movie The Sandlot, one of my personal favorites, by the way.
We all lived together in the neighborhood for a couple of more years, mostly through junior high school, and every summer was great. But none of them ever came close to that first one.
Everything has to come to an end at some point, otherwise if it keeps going on too long, it could make what you initially loved about the show become tedious and overdone. Keeping the story strictly to one rather eventful summer may not have been everyone's first choice, but I would rather the show end on a strong note. It's also nice to see that kind of message in a show like this, because it's a complicated emotional spectrum. It's nice to see the creative team treating the viewers like competent people, and not just making everything easy. Those kinds of morals and messages are what make a show like Gravity Falls so special.
Ready to head into the unknown?
Nope. Let's do it.
So, those are my top 10 favorite episodes of Gravity Falls, and as promised, I will say which one is actually my number 1. If I have to choose just one episode, it would be Sock Opera, followed very closely by The Inconveniencing. This episode just works. It's quick-witted, the slapstick is on point, the characters all work, Bill Cipher is at his funniest, and overall it's just the episode that makes me laugh out loud the most, and that's really gotta count for something here. So I'm curious to know, what are your favorite episodes of Gravity Falls? Post in the comments below. Is it an episode that I talked about in my top 10, or is it a different episode entirely? What is it about the episode that you really love? I want to know if it's different from any of the things that I've mentioned in my list. Mostly, I'm just curious to know, what is it about the show that strikes a chord with you? As always, thank you for joining me on this Patreon-sponsored episode of Screenshots. If you're curious to know about my Patreon page and what kinds of rewards there are, including having me do something as a review, feel free to check out my page at www.patreon.com/Kaluna. Thanks for joining me on Screenshots, and I'll see you in the next episode, guys! Bye!
At the Mystery Shack, weird stuff, it always happens late. Wax figures take an axe and decapitate, staying up late. Watching the Duchess approves and taking money from rubes while solving mysteries too. We solve the mysteries too.